Here on AM 790 KBC, Larry O'Connor Show. Right now we're joined by Judge Stephen Bailey. Talk about this PG&E bankruptcy and what it means. There's a lot of things about what it means in terms of the taxpayer, in terms of those homeowners who were suing PG&E. In fact, well, we'll start there in a moment. But Judge Bailey, thanks for joining us, sir.
My pleasure. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Tell me about, first of all, what this means. Everyone says, oh, they're filing for bankruptcy. That doesn't mean they're going out of business, of course. It just means that they can sort of negotiate their outstanding debts, right?
That's exactly right. What it does is put a stop to all of the creditor proceedings, everything from the lawsuits related to the fires to, quite frankly, tax payments to local jurisdictions, and all the other debt that they have. And the court intervenes and basically organizes the debts and makes sure that the best interests of the creditors, the best interests of the company, the best interest of the ratepayers are addressed. Now, what is the best interest is where the disputes come in.
Right, I bet, because, if I'm a homeowner and my home is gone and all my belongings and I'm devastated because of their neglect and I've got a pending lawsuit, have I got to wait in the back of the line now to get my settlement? And is my settlement going to be like 50 cents on the dollar compared to if PG&E had not filed for bankruptcy?
That's exactly right. PG&E estimated it had $30 billion in potential debts and claims off of the 2017-2018 fires. And that doesn't count just the ongoing business debts that they would normally have. So $30 billion is far in excess of the book value of the company. So if they were to just take the whole company and sell it, liquidate it, they don't have $30 billion there.
Yeah. And last I checked, the executives there at PG&E, I know that John Simon just became the CEO this month, but they're still making some hefty salaries there, right? They're still in line to get bonuses. In fact, oftentimes executives who shepherd through a bankruptcy and make sure they sort of bring the company out of it, they end up getting a pretty good bonus on that.
And they can with court approval. However, I think from the taxpayer's standpoint and the ratepayer's standpoint, because it's a public utility, it's less likely that huge bonuses are going to come out for the executives. But you're exactly right. It could happen.
Yeah, so let's talk about the taxpayer here because it is a public utility, and we know that there are changes in how these things are operated with deregulation. When was that now? 25 years ago, I think, 30 years ago. But we the taxpayers are still sort of on the hook for a lot of this.
We remain on the hook for a lot of this. The first bankruptcy filing that took place in 2003. Actually 2001, and the plan was finally approved in 2003, was a result of, frankly, California's mismanagement of deregulation. This one is still sort of, I guess you could blame it on the state of California. I mean, we know that global warming is taking place. We know it's changing the environment, particularly in Northern California. And the state and the utility and the Public Utilities Commission really hasn't addressed the issue of global warming and required these public utilities to take the steps necessary to protect their infrastructure so that it doesn't create these wildfires.
Well, I mean, setting aside the question of global warming, I mean, I remember when I was a kid, we had tons of droughts. We had wildfires. We had, this is not new on the horizon. I would think that if you're in the business of being a public electrical utility in the state of California, this has got to be something that you deal with, and you've dealt with it. We've had wildfires in California, and some of them related to the power companies and their infrastructure for, decades before anyone ever mentioned Al Gore's global warming.
Right, but the brush in California has become increasingly flammable, drier and drier throughout, these periodic droughts. Now, I'm not a big-time guy, fighting global warming, but I do think that the utilities do have a responsibility to both the ratepayers and to the people of the state of California.
There was clearly negligence
generally
here.
Stop this.
Absolutely. Regardless of what you believe the origins of these conditions that brought on the brush fires, there's clearly negligence here. And that sort of brings me to my last question. I mean, people lost their lives in these fires. Are these executives or anybody related to PG&E in any way criminally liable? Can they be? Should they be criminally liable?
Well, there is a criminal investigation taking place right now as to, how negligent PG&E was, particularly in the Camp Fire. The outcome of that, I think, is sometime away. Department of Forestry and Fire Protection is doing an investigation as to the exact origin of the fire. Right now, I think the general consensus is that the origin of the fire was from PG&E and PG&E equipment.
Right.
But until the state finishes its investigation, we won't know.
Forgive me for my incomplete question.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. My question was, is PG&E criminally liable? And I think that there are a couple of courts who have said, yes, PG&E is. I guess my question, what I meant to ask is it the executives? Will they name the executives or anyone who works at PG&E personally criminally responsible?
They can. Whether they will or not depends on the actual executive's involvement.
Gotcha.
Because you're not going to prosecute someone who is tangentially, involved in it. But senior executives do have criminal liability in many of these cases, and we just look back at the number of companies, Enron, and the executives that were prosecuted and went to jail for their criminal acts. Same could happen for PG&E.
All right. And finally, I mean, my heart goes out to the people who have lawsuits pending, and I hate that they might get shafted because of this, the bankruptcy court, and have to wait in the back of the line for their debts to be settled. But from a taxpayer's perspective, the bankruptcy restructuring is probably the best for the state's budget and for the taxpayer's liability here. Is that not right? I mean, this ends up benefiting us because we won't be paying the full debt liability that we would normally have had to pay our fair share for.
Right. I mean, bankruptcy is a process to have the orderly winding up of a company and its debts. And you really do want the bankruptcy process to work. The problem is it takes so long. And those people who lost everything and lost loved ones, I mean, they're sort of at the back of the line. And I think at the end of the day, they need to be considered, and they really ought to be moved up in the process because they're the ones who have suffered the most.
I agree. Absolutely. Well, we'll watch this, and I appreciate you sending us your expertise on this and analyzing it for us. Judge Stephen Bailey, retired, but still on the job. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.